everyone, my name is Tara. I'm a freelance editor, and here's a recap of February 2025. I have a lot of thoughts, but I am not super experienced with vlogging or speaking in front of a camera, so you'll have to bear with me. I mean, I guess that's the whole point of me making these videos to begin with. The point of me making these videos is to get comfortable in front of a camera and explaining my thoughts and feelings as succinctly and interestingly as possible. So here we go. I will be splicing in B footage of me making coffee just as something different, so you don't have to look at me the whole time. I mean, you could just tab out and second screen. So anyway, freelancing is sort of not what I expected. Yes and no. Let me explain. So in January of 2025, establishing my brand was a relatively straightforward goal of mine. It primarily consisted of working on my website, printing business cards, and setting up Upwork and Fiverr profiles. I don't foresee Upwork and Fiverr or even Reedsy or tutoring sites to be my primary source of clients in the future. At least I would hope not. But setting up those profiles as potential avenues for clients was a great way to force myself to learn how to advertise myself. Those tasks felt like pretty big hurdles, but they were relatively straightforward. There was a set outcome that I was looking for that didn't require any clients yet. February of 2025 has been quite the opposite. My goal was to develop some sort of client pool. As someone who was new to the freelancing and editing world, this is obviously expected. There were additional things going on in my life that made it so I had to balance, family, relationship, personal, and freelance time a little bit more carefully. One example being I had a trip to Reno. With that caveat out of the way, I will share with you all of the freelance work that I have done this last month, aside from making the January video, of course. I did manage to edit a bunch of cover letters and resumes. You can kind of tell when someone hasn't worked on their resume in a couple of years. The content itself isn't an issue. It's just typically there's some sort of energy to it that you can kind of feel. The biggest tells for that, aside from not really fleshing out your most recent work experience, is the formatting. Sometimes the formatting is really choppy and in a way to where online, application tracking systems aren't going to like. Now we're in an era where fancy formatting really isn't that special. Fancy formatting really isn't that important or impressive anymore. There is a caveat to how pretentious you want to be about the formatting or way that you write certain bullet points on your resume. HR and recruiters and managers are more focused on the content. Employers only spend an average of 7 to 15 seconds on any given resume, but if they are taking your application seriously, you obviously want the resume to be quite polished, so then when they look further into your work experience, you want your resume to be really polished since it's probably one of your first impressions for whoever could potentially be hiring you or contracting with you. You're able to highlight your skills, your qualifications, and your milestones and achievements as a workforce member. Something interesting that I noticed while editing different cover letters, this isn't the most groundbreaking news, but everyone has different writing styles. Thus, everyone's cover letters are quite different. It was fun to see the very different philosophies that people take with their cover letters. Obviously, there's no best way to write a cover letter. It's all incredibly subjective, but I do feel like there are some pros and cons to these broad categories that I've identified from this last month. I guess the broad categories that I would describe what I've seen this last month are cover letters where the applicant is focused on their experience, cover letters that bleed more so into personal statements, and cover letters that are super minimal, and I'll explain what that means in a moment. For the cover letters hyper-fixated on work experience, I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's pretty safe to say experience is almost always king. That's why you're always gonna see online job postings say requiring anywhere from 2 to 5 years of experience. I think one of the bigger cons to this method is that it can feel redundant especially when you're submitting this with a resume, which already lists work experience overall. If you end up having an interview after applying for the position and the interview is very focused on asking about previous work experience, then all of that writing in the cover letter could also feel redundant. It could have been an opportunity to highlight unique characteristics about your work ethic that might be harder to articulate in an interview. When it comes to cover letters that feel more like personal statements, one of the pros to that is, depending on how you write it, your cover letter could be quite gripping. It can make an employer curious about what you could bring to the table. This is assuming that the cover letter is actually read very carefully and thoroughly. One of the cons to that, though, is that method might not be very ideal for the corporate setting. That actually might not make you look very ideal for businesses or corporate entities. If you're applying for a corporation where there are very rigid standards of work ethic and presentation, then they might not like that. They might just want an employee who is, I guess you could describe as submissive or follows things to a T. Showing that creative spirit may or may not actually be beneficial to you. Depending on what you write in a personal statement, that could also lead to pretty significant biases in the hiring process. Sometimes corporations or employers just really want to see that, LinkedIn schlock, that artificial polish, to show that you can assimilate to a certain work culture. Like, I got laid off after working here for 3 months, but I'm so grateful for the opportunity kind of LinkedIn post. Anyway, I'm kind of just rambling now. The last broad category of cover letters that I worked on this month, I would just describe as minimal, where there's a very clear beginning, middle, and end. The first paragraph is, here's a quick summary of who I am. I'm applying for this role. The second paragraph is, here's a good chunk of my work experience. Here's a few details about them. Here's a few things that I'm proud of. And then the last paragraph being, thank you again for your opportunity. Thank you for your time and consideration. I hope to hear back from you. Here's my contact information. And there's nothing wrong with that either. It's just fun to see how folks in overlapping industries have very different cover letter philosophies. I'm switching topics here, but February was also a pretty big milestone in terms of my day job at the hospital. I've actually been doing a lot of editing related work while clocked in, and that's pretty cool. It just so happens that a lot of documents related to my work and a lot of the work of my colleagues and coworkers needed to be updated. So during my day job, I've been pretty focused on revising a handful of pretty heavy documents. So when it comes to editing work in the second half of February, it's actually been pretty focused. A lot of that work has been pretty focused in my day job, which is something surprising for me to share. And that kind of goes back to why freelancing is sort of not what I expected. Obviously, as a freelancer, you're not clocked in like a typical day job. And so the path to success isn't always straightforward. Things are going to be pretty rogue on the day-to-day. And so that I expected. If you can build a career on your passion and you get to make your own hours and do it the way you want to, that's incredible. That's an incredible privilege. What I wasn't expecting on my freelance journey was for it to bleed so much into my day job and for it to be a core component of my work. And I'm super thankful for that. Now I just need to find a way to make my editing passion and career profitable and sustainable in tandem with my career at the hospital. I'm not just an editor and I'm not just an administrator. I'm both. I'll keep putting in the work and trying to find more creative ways to put in the work, and we'll see what happens in March. So thanks for watching. Bye-bye.